you. Chair, now recognize Ms. Lee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to the census, many people think it's just like a boring form that we do every 10 years. And as I was listening to some of my colleagues speaking out, I think it's more important than ever that we talk about the actual importance of the census. I think particularly about the fact that, we have people talking about what is the importance of race in the country that relegated people to one drop. One drop of Black ancestry determined whether or not they had different outcomes by the government, by government mandate, by government policies. And those things aren't necessarily erased simply because of the Civil Rights Act, for instance. But neither here nor there. Fun fact, I was actually a census enumerator in one of my lives. So I've actually lived on the other side of the census count. And I can actually, and will later on in this question line, speak to specifically how difficult a job it is to actually extract this type of information that is crucial and critical. We're talking about information that is used to determine where and how, when we built roads or bridges, funding for schools that we see really need to be opened, in libraries, or deciding where to put fire departments or hospitals. The census data is the starting point for so much. Director Santos, is it true that the Federal Highway Administration, for instance, uses census data to decide which road and bridge improvements get prioritized?
That is correct.
What about low-income housing projects? Is it true that HUD uses census data to figure out where a project is going to be built?
Correct.
Is it true that census data is used to make sure that the Voting Rights Act is enforced?
Correct.
Is it used to decide which areas get Title I grants for their schools?
Yes.
Or Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, Pell grants, the National School Lunch Program, all use the census data, correct?
Correct.
It's staggering, isn't it? A single form filled out by millions shapes 353 programs to provide $2.8 trillion in federal funding for communities across America. And that was in 2021 alone. I'd actually like to thank my Republican colleagues for bringing up undercounts, because here is the ugly truth. In 2022, the New York Times reported that in the 2020 census, undercounted the number of Hispanic, Black, and Native American residents, even though the overall population counts were largely accurate. These are the same groups that have been historically undercounted. These are people, families, communities, the very folks most dependent on the funding census data helps allocate. And many of those funding programs are looking at more than general population numbers. They're looking at demographics, income levels, age, and education levels, data that can't be figured out with just estimates. The George Washington Institute of Public Policy estimates the value of each completed census form at more than $4,000 a person. That's the value of a single census form. Multiply that by thousands or millions, and we're talking about a catastrophic loss for the people who have already had the deck stacked against them. Unfortunately, there are no do-overs for the census, and it's something that we just can't procrastinate on improving as we prepare for the 2030 census. So back in 2010, when I was a census enumerator counting in my own community, obviously overwhelmingly Black, I can say firsthand that we didn't have the right tools to do the job. And you spoke to how difficult it can be when the questionnaire is too long, to get people to open up, to share basic information about themselves, and when they admittedly have fears, concerns, and apprehension about the motive of people who work in government. And after listening to this testimony today, we probably shouldn't be surprised if more people are more fearful of providing that sort of information. The 2020 census had a tough time also between the pandemic, Trump stopping the count early, major hurricanes and wildfires, as we heard from our colleague from Florida. And looking forward, we need to make sure that the work is being done now to make sure that the 2030 census is as accurate as possible. We all agree with that. Director Santos, can you tell us more about some of the ways you're working to improve census data collection to make sure that the count is as accurate as possible across the country?
Yes, I can. We are expanding our use of online participation with the addition of the broadband programs that extend access to the internet. We are going in and testing out culturally relevant messaging and contacts throughout the U.S. Throughout our test sites to make sure that the messaging we provide resonates with the participants. But at the same time, because there is a mistrust in government, we are leveraging and building a network of local community groups across the nation who can work hand in hand with us so that they can be the trusted messengers. And we can use multiple angles in order to get to bolster the messaging and have individuals then more engendered to participate.
Thank you so much for that. As somebody again who did the census in my own community, I truly believe that some of those fixes will be helpful. They will be meaningful, and I look forward to a 2030 census where communities like mine in the Mon Valley, in those areas of Pittsburgh, for instance, are not undercounted. I thank you so much, and I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Santos, for being here with us today. The U.S. Census Bureau carries